All right, welcome back, everybody, to the 20th week of our Tech Bytes JavaScript session. 20 weeks, aka the 5-month mark of our JavaScript session. Wow, have we come a long way, right? Starting way back in June, we started basic coding concepts, learning how to type out our first variable, learning what a variable even is, to learning about for loops, while loops, what they can do. And now, guys, we have made so much progress over the past 5 months. Truly crazy to think how fast time has flown by. And we've been having a blast, right? Communicating and making some awesome projects. So glad you guys here with us. If you are coming from the web development course, welcome back to the 3-month mark, aka the week 12 of our web development course. As always, love to see you guys here. Thank you so much for joining us. And without any further ado, let's get to it. All right, guys, if you do not already know who I am, guys, my name is Rayan Siddiqui. I'm a senior at James B. Conant High School. I love to program. Hopefully you have noticed that. I've made multiple apps for the App Store, made a dozen different websites for the internet, and really like making content, such as writing articles, making my own YouTube videos on my own tech YouTube channel, and running a sports talk show with my friends called Buzzer to Buzzer on YouTube as well. As always, guys, if you want to check out what the latest thing I've been up to, everything is available on my website at rayansiddiqui.com. Alrighty, so let's get down to today's 5th month anniversary agenda, right? So the first thing we're going to do is do a quick reminder. Some people did ask a few questions last week, which I wanted to go over today. Secondly, we're going to get down to our daily fun fact relating to programming language, which we are studying, that being in this course, JavaScript, and how it relates to the real world. Love doing those. And then we're going to go over our new project. Remember, last week we did officially finish our calculator project. That finished copy can be found in the Google Classroom. However, it was a great project. We had a lot of fun, did a lot of cool things with it as well. Added a bunch of features, not to mention. And this week we're going to be moving on to a new project, starting that out, that being the Hangman project. And we're not going to be diving so deep into that project this week, just going over the details, making our template, getting the logic down, make a plan, discuss the first concept, and code that first concept today. So let's get towards our first item on the agenda. Now, guys, here is a quick reminder. Some people were asking us throughout last week, where can we find these old sessions? Where can I go and recap over some old things which we have covered throughout this course? And the answer to that question is pretty simple. Just go to you can open the app or the website of YouTube, search the Schaumburg Library, and once you get to the Schaumburg Library, hit the playlist tab and scroll on over to the Tech Bytes playlist. And in that playlist, you can find around 50, or I don't even know how many videos we got now, considering all of our programs. But we can find a lot of our old videos, specifically going back, way back to the 2nd week of June. We didn't record the first week because it was just an introduction to the courses. But all the way from the 2nd week of our Python course and our JavaScript course, you can rewatch some old videos, brush up on anything you might have forgotten. And you can also always, actually go right now, if you can always go to our Google Classroom and go over some old week's recap, look over what we did that day, open up the code we did that day, if you ever want to just brush up or look at something we done in the past. So if you guys always have any questions, I'm more than happy to go over them through the Zoom chat, or you can always shoot me a message on our Classroom as well. All right, so now let's get towards our cool JavaScript fun fact for the day. Now I'm going to mention and preface it by saying it's not as cool as last week's. Last week was just amazing, right? We talked about how JavaScript saved an astronaut in space. It saved his life, essentially, when water started to come into his astronaut. But today, it's a bit more scaled down, to say the least, that being that the language of JavaScript can be used to create our own Google extensions. Now, I have a Mac, so I can't really show that feature with Google Chrome because I prefer using Safari. But if you ever use Google Chrome on a Windows desktop maybe, or even on a Mac, you probably noticed that there's an area in the top right-hand corner, like this image shows, where you can use your own extensions. Now, if you don't know what an extension is, basically these Google extensions are there to make our lives easier. We can use extensions to set alarms, to schedule emails, to have like a own calendar. There are a bunch of cool and little widgets which we can use with these extensions. All in all, they're there to serve a purpose, but that purpose is usually to just make our lives in a bit easier and do many processes, which we do multiple times in a quicker manner. But how does JavaScript come into play here? Well, we can actually create our own Google Chrome extensions. And the way we can do that is combining the knowledge which we've picked up through this course. That being using HTML, using CSS to make our extension look nice and the features to act nice as well. And most importantly, that JavaScript, the functionality, the logic behind what our extension does. And also, there is this thing which we've talked multiple times in the past about, that being an API. Remember, API is an acronym for Application Programming Interface. An API is there, guys, to make our lives easier. And using an API, we are able to connect our application, which we make, to Google Chrome so that we can use it as an extension. And through using this JavaScript technique of using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and an API, we can make our own Chrome extension, which acts as a shortcut. Now, there are two things which we got to mention here. Is that firstly, I believe it is free for you to submit your extension for approval. So say I make an extension which holds all of my Zoom links for my classes, right? It's like a little widget which I create with an extension in the top left-hand corner, which is going to keep track of all my Zoom classes online, right? That's the new way we've been doing things through a virtual environment, right? And say I make that, but right now I'm just using it by myself. How can I make it so that my friends, you guys can use it as well? Well, essentially, there's like a team who reviews whether or not your extension can be approved, and I believe it is free. If I might be mistaken right there, but essentially, you approve. Hopefully, if your extension does get approved, millions of others of people can download it as well. And in fact, if I try to open a Chrome extensions list, we can browse that. Hopefully, that is possible on a Mac. Let's see if we can check it out. All right, here we go. So if we take a look at the top 44 extensions, maybe you even use some of these. We got some, looks like HubSpot sales, keeping track of sales, looks like through emails, a little to-do list, a classical example, an email scheduler we got a timer, looks like some type of sort, a password tracker, a little to-do list, and website tracker. So as you guys can see, there is a bunch of functionalities with this idea of using Google Chrome extensions. And the cool thing is that once again, at the end of the day, guys, the stuff we're learning has such a cool impact, and we can use this knowledge of JavaScript to take that next step. Am I saying, are we super ready to make a Chrome extension? No, but definitely the stuff which we have learned throughout the past 5 months is going to be very useful, and building that, keep on building on those building blocks. And we definitely have the foundation if we ever want to go ahead and make our own Chrome extension. It's going to be a fun lesson to do, right? One time, something which we can look into. So hopefully you guys enjoy that fun fact for the day. And now let's move on towards discussing our newest project. Now, guys, like I mentioned at the earlier of this session, in case you are coming in this week new, or maybe you skipped a couple of weeks, remember, we have officially finished our calculator project, and that calculator project can be found in our Google Classroom. Head on over to the classwork tab, head on over to the 19th week recap, and you can find the link to our project, and you can go over a finalized and finished copy of our project. We had a lot of fun with that, worked on that for almost a month and a half, and it was a pretty grandiose and a pretty big project, but safe to say we did finish it. And now we're going to be applying our skills, moving on to the next level. If you notice, guys, we started out pretty small way back in the early days, right? It's like seeming like we're throwing back everything here, right? Talking about the old times. But we started with a really small skilled project. We started off making like games like Jeopardy, quiz games. Then we progressed and eventually made our way towards a calculator project, which was on another level. And now this Hangman project is on the next level. This is where we're going to get started getting more advanced, but something which we'll be spending a lot of time on, making sure we are all understanding what is happening, make sure that you guys are understanding what is happening, and make sure that nobody is left behind. But the basic idea with this Hangman game is the game Hangman. If you ever played it, guys, it's basically a guessing the word game, in which you have multiple people. You might have a 2-player game in which, say, me and a friend are playing. So say Allison and I are playing, Allison would choose a word. She might choose the word library, right? And I'll be responsible for guessing letters, such as all the way from A through Z. And essentially, whenever I guess a letter correctly, she would fill it in the blank space. And whenever I answer a letter incorrectly, usually a little figurine is drawn. For our purposes, we're probably not going to be getting that advanced of drawing our own figurines. We might just have a little number or little string, which is going to keep track of where we are at in the stage of our game. But the basic idea is a hangman game. If anybody is confused as to what a hangman game entails, definitely let me in the chat. We can go through a real example if you'd like, but it's pretty straightforward, I believe. We've all played it, right? And guys, the core concepts which we're going to be going over through this project are going to be a bit more advanced, those involving some from the last project as well, such as variables, functions, loops, a lot of parameters, a lot of logic if-else statements, and a lot of something which we've sort of touched on in the past, that being substringing. Now, guys, we use substringing particularly with our calculator project when we were trying to do multi-digit operations. And throughout our hangman game, we are going to be using the idea of substringing, aka extracting a certain piece of letters from a word in order to compare. That's something which we'll be getting down to in the next couple of weeks, not necessarily today. And yeah. And speaking of today, what we will be doing today is going to be going over how the game is played, hopefully we all know, and discussing how we are going to be formatting our game as well. And then we're going to get started coding. More specifically, we're going to get started with setting up our HTML, making sure that all the buttons and all the things which we want to format on our web page are there, so that we don't have to spend much more time on that in the coming weeks as well. And then we're going to get towards our first concept, that being creating an array with multiple words and using the math.random function in order to select a random word. And the way which we are going to be doing that is using that math library, which we've discussed a ton in the past. We discussed a lot about the math functions which are available to us with our calculator project. But today we'll be using one specific function, that being the math.random function, in order to select a random word, which is the word we're going to be guessing. So say we have an array with the words apple, cat, baseball, basketball. We're going to use the math.random function in order to select one of those random words, and that will be the word which we are going to be trying to successfully guess. So without any further ado, guys, let's get towards coding this concept, setting up our HTML. I'm going to head on over to our website of jsfiddle.net. It will always, like always, be dropped in the chat as well. If you're wondering, for this project, is there a template? No, there is not a template for this project. Why is that? Well, it is to get that idea reinforcement that we are getting better and bigger throughout our programming journey, starting to develop more by ourselves. Am I saying I'm not going to be helping? Of course not. Always going to be here with the ride with you guys. But it's just towards that, so we can get that idea of making something from totally scratch and making our way all the way to the end. So I'll give everybody a couple of minutes to get onto our websites, and we'll get started then. All right, and once everybody is on the website, just drop in the chat. You are there, and we get started. All right, as you guys are transitioning to the website, I'm going to name my fiddle. We'll call it Tech Bytes Hangman, like such. We got a blank canvas. Hopefully it'll be filled up much more as we start to code throughout the weeks. And now, guys, let's get started. All right, so how about we visualize how we want this game to actually look like. So what I'm going to do is use the annotation tool right now just to envision and sort of create an outline of what we want our final product to look like. Probably little header tag right here saying Hangman game. Probably below we'll have some instructions right here on how to play the game for the user, right? That'd be nice. And then once we have all of the nitty-gritty details sorted out at the top, then I'm envisioning that we probably have a variable right here, which is going to represent the the underscores, aka the blank spaces left of what word we are guessing. So say like a word, in this case could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe we have the word I don't know, apple. That would be 5 underscores long, right? So 5 blank spaces. So we are going to be guessing the word apple. Draw that connection. Obviously, we're not going to be showing the user ahead of time what the word is, just to make sure that the game is being played fairly. And then I envision us probably having a little variable right here, which we're going to be manipulating through the DOM, aka the document object model. We can have attempts, maybe like a variable, keeping track of how many times we've guessed, and something like if we guess over, how about a fair number would be 26 letters in the alphabet. How about 7 or 8? We'll go be nice 8 times. Then the game is over. That would mean we got to establish some logic with our game, right? Yeah, some more functions that way. What else? Let's see. We would probably have to have an area for the user to actually enter a letter, right? That'd be nice. Now, there's 2 ways which we can go about doing that. We can either prompt the user through the Safari or through the whatever OS you are using, whatever search engine the case might be, or we can do a little text field, right? We can draw and create our own text field that tends to look a bit more professional, guys. Remember, we use that in our calculator project. If I can draw a rectangle correctly, there we go. Something like that. And in this, we could enter one letter, such as the letter A, letter C, letter D, something of that sort, right? We would probably have to convert our letters to lowercase letters just to make sure that the input is correct. And also, one last thing which we do need to have is a button, right? Which we would click every time we want to submit our guess. So down here, I would envision us having like a submit guess. And whenever we hit the submit button, we would most likely call a function in our JavaScript. And that function would do some logic part, which we're not going to be doing much of today. But that function, guys, I'm just going to give a little hint ahead of time, is going to entail the idea of substringing and comparing whether the letters we have entered match any of the letters of the word we are using as well. And that should take care of our HTML part of our game. Definitely, like we did for our calculator project, when the project is nearing the end, we can look towards some CSS, but our main focus for the next couple of weeks will be the HTML and the JavaScript portion. So with a good visualization, this is speaking about this visualization, guys, this is actually a very real world application. Many times when we start to work on larger projects, which I work on school or personal time, I always like to draw it out and get a basic idea of what am I going to be making. Because sure, the code will naturally come about. It will come about through research, through me just typing and using previous knowledge, but also having a clear understanding of what we want to make is very, very important. And as we get towards making these more advanced projects like this Hangman, it is always an amazing idea to do that first. Alrighty. So what I'm going to do is actually put that back on the screen and sort of, how about we start putting some of this to real life? So how about we first create a header1 tag, so h1, remember less than, h1 and then greater than sign. Make a name for our Hangman game. So Hangman, I'll call it Tech Bytes, Hangman Tech Bytes Edition. Give it a nice name right like that. Hair run, we should see it up here. There we go. Still black colored. We can definitely change that as we go on towards the end. Then how about we create a, how about a header 3? Let's see how big that looks. Okay, that should be fine. We can talk about what the game instructions are. So I could actually do an h2 tag first. Add some spacing. Say instructions. Like such. And then we can add our instructions. And if we take a look, guys, there is a new element which we haven't really talked about, that being a list. And a list is actually a great way for us to bullet point and add instructions. And it's going to be pretty useful in today's lesson. So essentially, it's the same thing as a header tag, just do less than, letter LI, and then close that with the greater than sign, and we can add our instructions in here. So what I'm going to do is we can write our first instruction being, how about the computer will choose a random word from an array. Let's see how that looks. There we go. Then we can add another list tag. Then we could be like it. We can do, how about objective, and then colon. Your goal is to guess the word before 8 tries, or else you will lose. Pretty nice and straight to the point instructions, right? And what I'm going to do now is clear the screen because it's starting to get a bit clogged up. There we go. Give everybody a quick minute to catch up. As always, guys, if you feel like I'm going too fast, ever have a question, feel free to let me know in the chat. All right, so now we got that out of the way. How about now we create a little paragraph tag. Give this paragraph tag an ID, which we'll be using in the future. We can set it equal to number tries the user has gone through. Right now, we can just set it equal to number of tries is going to be 0 because it's the beginning of the game, right? And a couple more things. We got to make a text field where the user can actually input their letter, right? So what I'm going to do is do less than sign, the word input. The type of input is going to be equal to a text input. The value which we put inside can be guess the letter. And if you'd like, if you don't want to go through the hassle of having to delete the word guess letter every time, you can always get rid of that as well. And lastly, how about we give it an ID so that we can extract whatever letters we input in the future, and we'll call it user guess text field. And then close that text field off, like such. All right. And lastly, guys, one more thing which we have is to make a button. And we need that button to serve the purpose of whenever we add our letter so that we can hit submit so that we can see if the letter was right or incorrect. So what we can do is do button, give the button an ID. In the future, if you want to make it look nice, we can say submit button. Give that button an on click. Remember, this is going to associate our button with a function. Set that on click equal to submit letter. We'll make that function later on. And then we can add that greater than sign and add a name for our button. We could just say submit yes, something like that. That looks pretty similar to what we visualized, right? Making that nice HTML, getting that core idea down right. Give everybody a minute, and then we'll get started with our JavaScript concept for today. All right, so now let's move on towards the JavaScript of our program today. That being that, firstly, how about we just make the function for our submit letter button. Remember, you need the open and close parentheses as well. And what I am going to do is just type the name of my function, which I declared above in my button. Open and close parentheses, open and close squiggly brackets. And just, we're not going to be adding much code to this today, but something which we will be utilizing in the future. Give everybody a minute to catch up. All right, so now how about we get to today's concept of, guys, us choosing a random word which the user will have to guess. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is just go down and create a new function. This function I'm going to call do stuff before game. Pretty straightforward, guys. Inside this function will be called before our game actually runs. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this function is going to be responsible for all of the housekeeping tasks, such as getting the word, initializing our variables to a certain value just before the game starts, and we'll be learning how to do that and how to make a function run before our JavaScript is called in a little bit. But first, how about we code the stuff inside of this function? So before the game starts, a couple things which we have to do is firstly choose a word from an array. Now this array will probably have a bunch of different and random words, right? So what I'm going to do is firstly create a global variable and call that var user. How about we first create the array? We can say array of words. Remember, just var array of words equal, and then the bracket symbols for our array. And how about what type of words do we want the user to enter? Well, we could really just go online right now and just copy paste a bunch, but how about we just do a couple off the top of our heads? How about we do sport names? We can do basketball, remember then comma, another quotation marks. We can do football, comma, another quotation mark. We can do baseball, comma, we can do hockey, and we can do soccer. There we go, 5 sports. And then also I'm going to create a global variable in order to hold the computer's word. So computer word, and just so that equal to an empty quotation marks, because we don't know what the word is right now. We got to do some math and use the math random function in order to choose the word. All right, so now how about we get towards how we are going to be choosing that random word from our array. Now guys, I'm going to use the annotation tool to make it clear. Remember, this basketball word is at the 0th index, the football at the 1st, baseball at the 2nd index, hockey is at the 3rd index, and the word soccer is at the 4th index. Now does that mean we only got 4 items in our list? No, it means we still have 5 objects. However, they are going till the 4th index because remember, an array starts at the index of 0. So keeping that in mind, how about we first of all create a variable which is going to hold, tell us essentially which index we're going to choose. And using that, we're going to be utilizing the math.random function. So what I'm going to do is say var random position. This is going to represent the position we choose, aka the word we're choosing from our array, is going to be equal to math.floor. Remember, math.floor cuts off any decimals, opening close parentheses, and then math.random, opening close parentheses like that. Remember, math.random is a function which generates a random number between 0 and 1. However, we have more than just 2 words, right? We got more than, because 0 and 1, they're 2 numbers, meaning we can only select 2 words. But we have 5 words, meaning we got to multiply our math.random by 5 because we have 5 possible selections which can be chosen for our computer's word. That's a bit of a long line. Make sure your parentheses are matching up, guys, and don't forget that semicolon at the end. And what I'm going to do now is that since just going to log our random position, make sure that it is being correctly chosen. So I'm going to do random position is, and log that out. You don't have to, just showing for visual purposes. I'll run this. And right now you can see that this function is not being called. I hit run. We don't see anything populate inside of our console. How do we do that? Well, we got to go back into our HTML because remember, do stuff before a game is a function which has to be called before our JavaScript is used, meaning it has to be called when our page is being initialized and refreshed. So what I'm going to do is go down here, type in a less than sign in the word body, and then type the word onload equals, open and close parentheses, the name of our function, that being do stuff before game, open and close parentheses, and then add that closing greater than sign, like such. And now if I run this, guys, we see that our console is going to populate because this line is so useful. It is calling our do stuff before game function without me having to click a button when our web page is loaded. Essentially, this function is going to run before everything else. And now if I go to the console, we indeed do see that our function is ran and we are outputted with a random position at 3, meaning the 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Hockey should be selected. Now, how do we make that connection between a random position and our array? Well, it's something which we've done in the past, but not much of. And the way we're going to do that is firstly, do our global variable of computer word, set that equal to the word being represented at that random position. So in order to do that, I'm going to type out the array name, array of words, open and close brackets, and I'm going to select the word at the random position. So guys, if I do the 0th position, for instance, and I alert the computer word, every time I run this, we're going to see the word basketball being alerted. Run it again, basketball, again, basketball. And the reason it's doing that because at the 0th index is the word basketball. Now we just got to swap out the number 0 for the variable random position, which represents a number. And using that, we are going to get a random word every couple of times based on probability, right? So now if I hit run, we see the word basketball. If I hit run, we should see potentially something different, such as basketball again, baseball now, see, baseball again, hockey, we got soccer, we got baseball again, basketball, and football. See, so that shows us that we are getting multiple different words being selected. And that was the main goal of today, establishing that we have an array with some random words. The computer chooses one of the random words from that array, and this will be the word which we will be guessing and establishing that logic in the coming weeks with. But that wraps up all of the code which we needed to write for today. All right, guys, so that concludes our 5-month anniversary JavaScript session for today. For next week, guys, we're going to be continuing working on our Hangman project. Hopefully, you guys had a great time today with our fun fact and starting to work on a new project, which is going to be a much more fun as well. As always, guys, so glad you guys were here and participated. Remember, I will be, if you would like, you can definitely come back next week for our web development course next Wednesday as well. Otherwise, I'll see you next week, guys. As always, guys, take care. I'll catch you guys on the next one. See you guys.